Welcome, everybody.
Mute us.
Just waiting for the last couple to come in. Excellent. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to ask is if you're not speaking to please mute yourself so we don't get background noise. That's great. Thank you. The second thing I'm going to ask of you is if you're not too shy to please turn your cameras on and let's pretend we're sitting in a room together and that this isn't virtual and that you know, we can get to know each other face to face, which is not that common anymore these days. So it would really be great to see you guys. Oh, I see some people. Henry, it's good to see your face. I have only spoken to you on the phone. Nice to see you. Excellent.
Nice
Excellent.
to see you too, Dan.
Yeah.
Is the entire meeting virtual, or do you have people there with you at the
Yes.
Federation?
No, we don't have. We decided to change it to completely virtual. Yeah.
Probably a good idea.
Yeah. Okay. So glad everybody's here. Just very quickly, by show of hands, how many of you attended the opening session on November 17th? Just really quickly. Okay. So about half or so, maybe a little less. Okay, so I'm saying it right now. If you'd like, after this, you can email me if you'd like, and I can send you a recording. So you can catch up and see what you missed, although we'll get through, we'll do a little recap tonight. Okay, so I want to first welcome, I want to introduce first members of the Jewish Community Relations Council Committee. If you don't know, the Jewish Community Relations Council, or the JCRC, is a, I guess, a department or a, you know, a part of Federation that is responsible for community relations. I know that's very broad. Right now, our focus is mainly combating anti-Semitism. And we are doing so through various channels, which you'll hear about tonight. That's the department and federation that I manage as a staff person. And we have some members of the committee here tonight. So we have Joel Karinsky. He's raising his hand over there. We have Amy Mallet. We have Liran Capuano, who's also going to be helping me tonight moderating. We have Rabbi Mark Klein, who's not here tonight. And we have Elliot Spack and Phyllis Freed, who are also I don't see yet, although they might be on a bit later. I also want to acknowledge some board members that I see. Ken Filmus, hi Ken. And Beth Krinsky, hi Beth. And I don't see Fran Samaya, but she might be on here as well in a bit. And is Mike Sharnikoff here too? Mike, I see his square. Mike Sharnikoff is also a member of our Jewish Federation Security Task Force. We're happy to have him here as well. Okay, so, and I'm gonna ask the members of the committee and Liran to jump in during the recap to fill in anything that you think I might have missed. So last month, almost to the day, we kicked off this, what we're calling an advocacy training session. And our goal is after about 6 of these types of more intimate settings, meetings or sessions, this group, and you know, if you're staying with us the whole way, that would be great. This group will be better informed, better trained, hopefully, to help Jewish Federation in its mission in combating anti-Semitism by advocating for the Jewish community. We are bringing in people later on this year in 2020 to talk about how to prepare teens, how to advocate for different types of issues. Each issue has a different way, different approach, different method. We're going to hear from national organizations that will give us the bigger picture, and we'll also talk about how to build interfaith relationships or relationships outside of the Jewish community as a way to combat anti-Semitism. We always like to say, you know, if we want friends, we need to also be a friend, or vice versa. It works both ways. So we also will be dealing with that. So last month we brought in representatives from major Jewish organizations. Each one of them is, I guess, a specialist in their field or in their way of approaching combating anti-Semitism, educating the Jewish community, etc. So I'll mention first the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL. The ADL, I'm sure most of you know, has been around for a long time, dealing with hate and bias and extremism, combating on different legislation, on different levels, such as legislative level. They also get community leadership involved, et cetera, et cetera. They came and spoke about, gave us kind of the bigger picture, you know, statistics, what's going on in the state, what's going on in the country, and so on. I think the main thing for me that stuck out was that in the religious bias category, Jews were the #1 targets, and over 56% of religious bias hate crimes were committed against Jews. And we are only, what is it, 0.19 or something, not even 2% of the population, or something like that. It's a very, very low number. Yet we still lead in that category as far as being victims of bias hate crimes. So that's one thing that stood out for me. We also heard from an organization called CAMRA. CAMRA mainly deals with the media and anti-Semitism and anti-Israel sentiment in the media. We heard basically about an uphill battle, making almost none or very small inroads in when it comes to dealing with journalists who do not report, you know, in a fair and balanced way, or I'll even say are anti-Semitic themselves, and it shows in their articles. That was probably for me, I would say the most not depressing, but it was very tough to hear, because it really is a difficult area, but it's where a lot of the damage is done as far as anti-Semitism. So that's not just a local problem; it's a world global problem where you know, Jewish organizations really need to focus. We heard from Stand With Us, which is, if you haven't heard, if you don't know Stand With Us, they're an organization, an educational organization that focuses on educating middle school, high school, and even university campus students about Israel mainly. That's how they started. They wanted the next generation of Jews to be more connected to the land of Israel, to their roots. But then as time went on and anti-Semitism grew and anti-Israel sentiment grew, they started to focus on preparing middle school, high school, and college students to address this issue in their daily life in their campuses, on their campuses. There too, although this organization does a very good job, there too is a very difficult uphill battle, especially on the university campuses. When it comes to, you know, anti-Israel sentiment, which for us in most cases is anti-Semitism. You know, we can, not today, but we can get into the differences of legitimate criticism and also and when that changes to anti-Semitism. We heard from an organization that's not as known as the others. The organization is called Open Door Media. They used to be called Jerusalem U. And they produce online digital content also that educates the next generation of Jewish youth. However, they really put out amazing videos that I think could and should, and I do, provide and send out to adults as well, Jewish and non-Jewish. They have a very wide range of subject matter that they cover. And again, I'm happy at a different time or separately to talk about exactly what is there. But I do recommend that you go online and check at some point, Open Door Media. And they spoke about their battle on social media and on TikTok and on Instagram, and you know what they see there as far as anti-Semitism and anti-Israel content, and how they are trying to push back by producing videos that are more fair and balanced and provide information, facts, and not necessarily, you know, just opinions. And again, uphill battle there as well. And finally, we heard from someone from our own organization, our parent organization from the Jewish Federation, to talk about what role we play and how Jewish Federation is a convener sometimes of all of these organizations, bringing them to our community and helping them focus on helping us with our local issues, and how we too push certain agendas, and how we too advocate for certain issues, and not just wait for the big national organizations to do so. Jewish Federations of North America is actually very big, but we here in New Jersey, we can take those issues and localize them and focus on that to try to make our community a better place for us to live as Jews. And again, a recording of that session is available, and I'm happy to provide it to anybody that would like. At this point, I'm just going to ask if the committee has anything to add, or anyone else that attended. Feel free to jump in. We want this to be more of a dialogue and not a lecture. So if anybody wants to jump in, you can unmute yourselves and go for it. Anyone?
I'll stick my 2 cents in very briefly.
Thank you.
Going forward over the last year and a half, 2 years, with all of the outbreak of anti-Semitism and anti-Israel, from, I'll say, my point of view, the Jewish alphabet groups, as I call them, have been responsive. They have not been primarily proactive. What we are trying to do within our JCRC is take it to them. Right now, we're essentially outnumbered. The people who are practicing anti-Semitism and anti-Israel have been in business for a number of years. They've created lots of lies. They are dealing with a Jewish community that is by and large uneducated. So one of our major goals will be to take back the battlefield, and I hate to put it in those terms, take back the dialogue, take back the truth. Okay, that's number one. And number two, the people who you've just met sitting around this table can't do it alone. So a second and equally important thing is, please think within yourself how important this kind of a response is to you, how much time you have, and please join us and let us hold hands so we can move forward together in a better way. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Anyone else?
I just want to say that the last session we had was very interesting. The panel was excellent. It gave us insight. And I think that just opening up dialogue and talking could really shed light on so much. Like I said, the panel, they were very well informed, and they presented examples which were very telling. Just conversation, just talking about. In fact, there was one, the representative from Camera, which is an organization that I learned more about just recently, was talking about how she was approached by somebody who mentioned that Israel doesn't want peace. And her response was, well, if every 17-year-old is going off to the IDF and to the armed forces, how can you say that they don't want peace? All parents are dealing with this, where their children are going off for training. And so, yes, of course, Israel wants peace. Sometimes just having these conversations, having these dialogues, and being able to discuss it openly really helps to solidify the points. And I think that we could all pick up different points by just having these conversations. So I'm just glad to see everybody here. And I think this group is just going to continue to grow from what I'm hearing. So thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Okay,
Yeah,
so
sure.
I'm gonna move on. So what have we been doing? Okay, so first and foremost, we have been engaging politicians on every level in the past year and a half. So much. I mean, Zoom has made it possible to reach state and federal leadership much more easily than it was, before Zoom and COVID. No one has to travel to DC or to Trenton, and it's also easier for the political leadership to schedule meetings. So we have been able to do that I'm going to cautiously say regularly, but I have met politicians that I never thought I would meet in my lifetime, and I thought that was pretty cool. So Zoom has allowed us to do that, and we have been making sure that the issue of anti-Semitism is not being buried anywhere on their desk, so to speak. We are making sure that this issue is at the top of their priority list. We come prepared with statistics and examples. We come prepared with suggestions on how to combat this increase of anti-Semitism. For example, education. And by the way, over the last couple of years, we advocated together with the national organizations and also the Jewish Federation on a national level for the Never Again Act. And if you haven't heard about it, it was passed in Congress, and it provides $10 million over the next 5 years for Holocaust and genocide education. And the Holocaust Museum in DC has been tasked with using that money to produce educational material that will go to the public schools around the country. Now, $10 million over 5 years is not that much, but it's a start. And that's one of the I would say one of the biggest wins for the Jewish community in the last couple of years in regard to combating anti-Semitism, because we know that education is key. So these are the kinds of things that we have been doing, and that was a great success. And another one real quick was also the security grants that come from the government. At first, before I came on, the JFNA, Jewish Federations of North America, was advocating for $90 million. Then we advocated for an increase to $180 million, which was passed. And now we're trying to get $360 million. And this money, in short, this money provides, allows synagogues and other nonprofit and religious institutions to apply for money to beef up their security on their premises. That's in general. Of course, there's a lot more detail to that. So these are two big wins and examples of how even a local federation can get on Zoom or get on the phone and talk to their, to Bonnie Watson Coleman and Chris Smith and Frank Pallone, who represent our federal representatives in Middlesex and Monmouth County. And we can push this agenda and ask them and to vote yes when it comes down to, when Congress votes. And this is what we've been doing. We've been doing the same thing on a local level. There's also a state security grant. I mean, these are the things that we have been doing and how Zoom allowed us to do. Although we are preparing for when Zoom ends, and Liran will talk about that in a bit, we do want to start thinking about the future and hopefully meeting, in person. We also focused on interfaith and I guess inter-race relations. We started a series called the Seeing Human series, and unfortunately, Rabbi Mark Klein, who is not here tonight, but he was leading that initiative. Seeing Human, coming together with members of different faiths, backgrounds, race, color, whatever, coming together and talking about how, we're all human, and it's time to come together and fight against those that are bringing hate to our community. Those, the same neo-Nazis that we're fighting also hate the members of the Black community, the Asian community. We don't need to fight this alone. And that's what the Seeing Human series is all about, is building these relationships outside of Jewish communities so that we can then advocate together and push leadership to act against hate in our community. That's another initiative that we're very proud of, and that's been very successful. I personally have been going around the community and briefing synagogues, JCCs, even people in private homes with small groups, briefing them on the situation, on the state of anti-Semitism. Education is key, knowledge is power, and that applies also to our community as well. If we don't know what's going on, then we don't know how to deal with it, how to fight back. We can't have our heads in the sand. And that's something that I've been doing together with support from my committee, going around the community and giving these kind of briefings. And I'll just mention that during COVID, during the height of COVID, this federation was instrumental in getting support for national initiatives, but also local initiatives. There's local funding for our community. We're pushing for more, aid for social services to provide support for people suffering during the pandemic. So these are the things that we have been dealing with. These are the things we've been working on, and we've registered success, and we're very proud of that. And that's what we're hoping that those of you who are here tonight will stick with us and start helping us in the future. So I'm going to actually turn it over now to Liran, who is going to talk about some of the ideas we're thinking of in the future. And then we're going to get through this, and then we want to hear from you. So stick around. We want to hear from you what you think is important, how you see yourselves involved, what you would like to see from Federation and the JCRC. All you.
Thanks, Dan. Yep. Thanks, Dan. So yeah, anyone who was at the previous event, thanks for coming to that. Anyone who wasn't, we are happy to share the video with you, so you can see exactly where in great detail what Dan was talking about. I wanted to just quickly, something Joel said made me think of something. Obviously, as the alphabet groups, as he referred to them as, which I call them that too. And by the way, the reason why we refer to them that is because they all have acronyms, right? ADL, SWU, which is Stand With Us, ZOA, so on and so forth. So all these groups, they do what they do on a national basis, and they do good work. But what Joel's right about is that a lot of what they do tends to be reactive to the current outrage of the day. But in addition to that, which is not, which is fine. It's what needs to happen. But we need to be a lot more proactive. But more importantly, really for our community, is they don't necessarily get what makes us tick, right? What's concerning to somebody who lives in New York City or Los Angeles or the middle of Alabama is not necessarily the same thing that affects someone who lives in Highland Park or Marlboro or East Brunswick or Edison or anywhere within our catchment area. We have unique issues here that are different than national issues, and they're even different than state issues, right? For us, for example, for me, everything that happens at Rutgers University makes a big difference. It's right in our backyard. Monmouth University too, although it's not in the news as often as Rutgers. But we have two very, very large, very serious major institutions that are often flashpoints, and they're here and they are what they are. And so that puts us in a different position than a lot of other communities. And not to mention, there's just other stuff here that makes us different than other places. We had situations here, and really this is why the JCRC came back together under the umbrella of the Jewish Federation. We had several incidents over recent years where there were problems or things that people were upset about locally, and we were getting people that were coming in from outside the community to deal with it. And that's not what we want. We want to be able to stand up for ourselves, make our voices heard, not have someone else who has a political agenda or some personal axe to grind coming here and making a spectacle of us. We are a large enough community. We have a strong enough federation. We have great support from Dan and everyone over there. And there's no reason why we need, outside organizations going to speak for us. Obviously, we're going to work with them. We love them. We had them at our last event. They have tons of resources. They do things that we could never do. But in terms of actually, going out there and sounding our own megaphone, we felt it was really important for us to have an organizational structure that does that, rather than just kind of outsourcing it to other places. So that's kind of the genesis of how we arrived where we are now. We originally wanted to start doing this a year ago, but actually a year and a half ago. But the virus happened, and that's what it is. But now there is no more time to waste. Our issues and concerns are not getting smaller. They're not getting less serious. They're getting more dire, if anything else. Dan's citing of the hate crime statistics was dead on, and Sadly, that is not a new thing. It is literally every single year we take the crown, probably one of the more dubious crowns you can take in this country. But for sure, there's been a different environment in the last year and a half, with a lot with COVID and a lot with everything else and the whole political situation. There's just a different feeling. There's more unease. I think we're all more on the edge of our seats now than we have been, certainly in my lifetime, and probably for a lot of you for a long time as well. So now is the time to act. Now is the time to do something. And what we are going to do, so Dan obviously talked about some of the things we were planning, well, excuse me, things that we had done. Let's talk about things we were doing. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to build out a group. You that are here are a great first step, but even that's not enough. There are how many Jews live in our catchment area, Dan? It's got to be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. I mean, what is it?
Laura, you probably know better, but you're on mute. Sorry.
Whatever
I think it's 150,000.
Yeah, whatever the exact number, it's in the six figures. And obviously there are not six figures here with us now.
Right.
And
100,000. Sorry.
Yeah, there you go. So I don't expect 100,000 people to get on a Zoom call or get in a room or anything like that, but we should at least build this group. So you should tell your friends, tell your if you have adult children and their friends, just spread the message, get it out there. We are recruiting. We need to build a group of people that is going to help show the people that are our elected officials and our government officials and other leaders that it's not just a few dozen people that are gonna complain and whine and post things on Facebook and send emails and write comments on news articles. We are here. We need to be heard. We vote. We matter. We control our own destiny. So that's our first step. And so we created this series of events that we kicked off, and tonight, and we have several more planned that we're going to be focusing on different things, on general ideas. What does it mean to be an advocate in 2021 for the Jewish community, for Israel, for whatever part of this moves you, and how to be effective, how to be proactive, and also how to be reactive when necessary in a smart and well thought out and strategic way. So I know that's a lot, and I know that's a big task, and there's a lot more to be done. So what we want to do is we set our sights on some relatively easily attainable goals, things that we've all done in the past, at least, or those of us on the JCRC or who have been involved in this kind of stuff. We know it's not that hard. All it takes is having a group of committed people that we can go with. And so we wanted to start, first of all, by talking to our elected officials. This is a lot easier than people think. A lot of people think that our DC representatives or our Trenton representatives are in some kind of ivory tower, and in a lot of ways they are. But at the end of the day, they know that they need to talk to their constituents, and as long as we have connections with their chiefs of staff or themselves directly, we can make that happen. We can, at any point in the next 6 months to a year, let's say, get a meeting with our elected officials, sit face to face with them and say, here are our concerns. Here are things that are keeping us up at night. Here are the things that we are worried about. We need you to help us make a difference. And we know that this works. We know that this makes a difference because we've done things like this, like Dan was pointing out, with the Holocaust education funding. Right before COVID, Dan and I and Amy and a few others from our cohort were actually in Washington, D.C., meeting face to face with our representatives about more funding for security measures, which passed, which was actually spearheaded in part by one or both of our senators. I know Menendez was big about it. I don't remember if Booker was also a co-sponsor, but either way, we were able to communicate to their staffs, and everyone that we spoke to ended up voting for it. I'm not saying that we did it single-handedly, clearly not, There are a lot of other federations and a lot of other organizations and a lot of other groups that met with their elected officials. But the fact is, we did it in tandem with others, and it mattered. If we hadn't done that, if other JCRCs and other advocacy organizations hadn't made that a priority, they would not listen. They only listen when you deal with them directly. So our plan is we want to recreate that. We don't want to just wait to go to Washington, D.C. once a year. We want to have regular dialogue with our representatives, both in the federal government, who all have offices in our catchment area, as well as our state officials. A lot of our political discussions in our personal lives focus on Congress and on the president and all this stuff, and that's obviously important. But the people who have a much bigger impact on our day-to-day lives are our state officials and our municipal officials, and they also have a much greater vested interest in speaking to us because they're much more localized, and so each individual vote matters a lot more to them. So our plan is we want to build a team of people that are well trained and well versed on the items that matter to us, that will then go to our elected officials, both in Trenton and in Washington, D.C. We might do it via Zoom. We might do it in person. Again, it's the virus's world, and we're just living in it right now. Although I really feel like we're hopefully reaching the end game soon with that, but we'll see. But one way or another, that's relatively easy. That's relatively easy. Other aspects of, when I say relatively easy, it's easy to organize that kind of thing. It's not necessarily easy to know how to represent yourself in front of these people, but our goal is to work on that together and build and grow together as a team. Another thing that we want to focus on outside of the political and governmental sphere is we have a robust group within the JCRC that is focused on building alliances outside of the Jewish community via interfaith or with other or talking to other ethnic groups. One thing that I would absolutely love to do, and when I say love to do, I mean like love hate, because I don't think it'll be a very comfortable event or program, but I would really like at one point to get to a place where we're able to sit with another minority group, maybe like a Black Lives Matter type of group, if not Black Lives Matter directly, or an LGBTQ group, or a Latino group, and talk to them about just have an open dialogue and say, look, we're all minorities. Why don't we collaborate on more things together? Why don't we do things, as a group, right? I don't know that that's necessarily going to be something that we do right away. I kind of think that that's something we're going to have to build up to, because I don't think that's going to be a very comfortable discussion. I don't know that everyone is necessarily built for what that dialogue would look like, but I think that would be a very interesting and outside of the box thing to do. So these are all things that we think that we can line up relatively easily in terms of, these are already connections that we have. These are already things, except for the last one, things that we've already done a lot in the past. We can kind of just slot people into that. A little bit more long term, what I would really like to do, and what Dan and I think other members of our JCRC would really like to do, is to have something like we had last month, where we had all these different alphabet soup organizations, all these Jewish and pro-Israel organizations do this kind of panel. I would love to do that with our elected officials. Right? If there's one thing that everyone agrees on in politics right now and in government right now, is that nobody seems to get along very well in Washington or locally, for that matter. But there is something that people tend to get along with, and even the people that are on close to the, maybe not literally on the fringes, but people that are kind of close to the fringes, most of them are still willing to issue a joint statement condemning anti-Semitism and expressing support for the Jewish community. I would like to take that a step further. I want to get them on the record and have a discussion about what they are doing for their community. And much like we had last time, where we had different groups talking about different things, we would like to get different perspectives from our people. Ultimately, they answer to us. They have to impress on us why they believe and they care about our concerns. It shouldn't be very difficult to do this. Now, it was a very different environment because it was 10 years ago, but this is something that APAC actually is very good at, and that is doing these kinds of bipartisan events. And we did this at Rutgers, actually, where we had Frank Pallone and Leonard Lance, who's not in Congress anymore, but a Republican and a Democrat. And even 10 years ago, it wasn't like they weren't really getting along, but they still both came to Rutgers, and they both gave speeches trying to outdo each other about how much they love the Jewish community, and we were having all these problems at Rutgers. So I think that we should be able to do that, and I think that would send a strong message to the community and to the public at large, which is very important also. One of the things that I think that as a community we don't do that well is we don't leverage our connections as well as we can to really broadcast to America, not just to ourselves, but to everyone out there, that the government, as much as they might fight about everything else, still is pretty good on this kind of stuff. And I know there might be people on here that might roll their eyes or be a little skeptical because everyone has their right and left and all that stuff. But when you get right down to it, every time a measure comes up in Congress that has anything to do with anti-Semitism or even anti-BDS, which is maybe a little bit different, you still end up getting 400 people in Congress to vote for it. It's not like even, and it's actually more than 400 usually. We're still looking at like 90% success rates on that stuff. So we need to take back that conversation. And instead of feeling like, oh, no one cares about us because there's a bunch of loudmouths out there that dominate the news cycle, we should be focused more on the vast majority and use that to show the public that we are not on our own, and to show ourselves as well. It feels, believe me, I don't know how many people have been on a mission to Washington or have sat in a room with their member of Congress. But there are a few things that make you feel better as an American, or as a Jewish American for sure, than having a politician telling you what your own concerns are. And honestly, I know that they're politicians. It doesn't matter to me whether they really believe what they're saying or not. It really doesn't. What matters is that they vote for the funding we need. What matters is that they vote for the statements that we need. That's what it comes down to. And we can make that happen as a group. So our goal is really to go in that direction. And those are the kinds of long-term things and short-term things that we want to do.
Lee, can we pause for a sec? Beth has a question.
Yeah, I want to go back to your comment about meeting with the different groups. LGBT, I wouldn't meet with Black Lives Matter. They're too much against us. But why would that be a future thing? The time is now to create community and to create alliances with those groups.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So so actually what you just said about Black Lives Matter is part of the reason why I don't think that it's an immediate thing. I don't necessarily mean Black Lives Matter, the umbrella organization, which has all kinds of problems. To me, that's just shorthand for African American rights group or whatever, which there's not really a good branding for that. But why I think that it's a longer term thing. When I say long term, I don't mean like 5 or 10 years. I just mean not the first thing we're going to do. The problem with that is I don't know how much they want to meet with us. And I say this as someone who was very active on campus, and we tried reaching out on campus to these groups, and they tend just not to want to hear it. They don't see us as being part of the same struggle that they're in. So far, I'm not saying that there is not a single group or a single person in those organizations that we can talk to. I'm just saying that in my experience, the way that in order for that to get to that step where maybe we could do something in tandem with one of these minority rights groups, we have to have a very different conversation first, because the conversation needs to be about why are we not a team anymore where we used to be? And that's going to take it's going to be a difficult discussion, because I already know a lot of what they're going to tell us. And so
This-
I just don't know that we're ready to jump right into that kind of conversation right away. So I think that we want to start it with things that are a little bit easier and lower hanging fruit. But I agree with you that that is a critical thing that we need to be working on. I just think that it's a time and it's a little bit of an investment of time.
I think this is a good point. Let's to start. We got a good conversation going. Maybe other people want to jump in. You know, what are your concerns? What would you like us to do? What would you like to help us do? Henry, go ahead, my.
Thank you very much, Dan, and Laurent, thank you very much for your presentation, very helpful. I think we're at a disadvantage in regard to other minority groups because frankly, we're white and they tend to see us that way, white privilege, white this, white that, whatever. It's hard to separate for them, I think, to separate our Jewishness from our whiteness. And in order to do that, that's a pretty big hill to climb. Not that we shouldn't make the effort. I think we need to. But I think that's really almost a starting point for all of what we're considering tonight.
Yeah, Henry, you're 100% right, and that's exactly what I mean. But that's a tough conversation, and it's a tough conversation that's why I said, you know, one thing that I would love / hate to do is this, because it's not going to be fun, and you know, but the fact is, I'm just going to say this right now. I said this to Dan when we were talking about this as something that we should be doing. You know, my grandfather was a slave. He was in a concentration camp in Germany, and he was one of the lucky ones because he lived. And that regardless of the color of my skin, like that's a real experience that I have that 99.9999999% of Americans don't have. So when I say I want to have that conversation, I want to have that conversation. Mm-hmm. And I think that before we do anything like that, we really need to have our own internal dialogue and kind of get to what we want to get out of it, what we want to say, what we don't want to say, how are we going to react to what being told what you just said, basically. Mm-hmm. Like I think that's kind of like, if you'll forgive the video game analogy, it's that's like the boss at the end of the game. You know what I mean? That's King Koopa. That's not the not the guys on the way. Whereas and not to mention, to be very clear, there's also not that much of a tangible, like, immediate thing that we would get out of that. That's why it really is a long-term thing. Whereas having a big event with a bunch of government leaders that would get in the news and would get press and would get attention and may actually lead to a tangible bit of legislation maybe getting passed. That's why I think and also we have a better template for that. That's why I think that's where we want to kind of start from and then kind of go from there.
So we have a hand. We have a hand up.
Okay.
It says Mark, but it's definitely not a Mark. Wait, you're muted though. You're muted.
I just realized that. I'm sorry. That's my husband. I'm Janine Free. And I don't know how to change it on my phone. Janine. Excuse me. So instead of going to groups like Black Lives Matter, where every kind of subgroup has their own direction, right? Then what about going to like the leaders of Black churches and maybe inviting them into these types of programs and let them bring the idea back to their congregations and address it that way?
Yeah, no, that's a great idea, and we actually have that. So Rabbi Klein, who's not here tonight, he has a lot of that interfaith kind of stuff, and I know he has some of those connections. I think that's a good stepping stone. I would specifically though want to try to eventually, and again, this is not a today thing necessarily, specifically to advocacy organizations though, because that's where the action happens a lot of times in the streets and where we run into also problems, frankly, where you have organizations like the major Black Lives Matter group, the umbrella organization ending up the way they've ended up, right? So yeah, but I think that's a really good starting point.
One thing,
What else would we, sorry,
Dan,
yeah,
yes,
Joel.
didn't we a couple of years ago, as a federation, one of the things that was done was a mission to Israel with
Yes.
Black churches and churches.
Correct.
The relationship
So
was established.
yeah.
And a relationship
So
was established.
those relationships were established. It was in 2018. They're still going on. I was the staff person on that trip together with other lay leaders, but I am still in I'll say weekly contact or bi-weekly contact with members of that group. So yes, Ken, that was a great trip, and it's led to these tight relationships, and we do contact them for help, support, and vice versa. So that's definitely proof that these kinds of relationship building works. Yes, Joel. We got to unmute.
Mute in the wrong place. Henry, just to come back to your comment, you're absolutely right, but okay. I think one of the things we all realize is while what you said is accurate, there are additional pieces. Okay, a lot of what goes on within the Black Lives Matter group and other groups, whether they're black or white, is this wonderful new word called intersectionality. They pick a whole bunch of other topics to justify the positions that they take, and making Jews and Israelis a part of the problem takes pressure off of what they have to do, okay? And I would just like to suggest, for purposes of this meeting, that it's a whole much longer discussion where hopefully one day we'll sit around a table and be able to plan for that. But it definitely has to be, you know, at or near the top of our agenda in reaching out to the other groups in our communities. But what I would just like to ask is, with a lot of other people around the table, are there any other comments they'd like to make or concerns about how we can all get together to work to keep moving forward and expand our activities and get more done?
I'll just add to that. Let's hear from not necessarily committee members, although Amy, I just saw you kind of jump in. So, but I do want to hear from others. But Amy, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, that's okay. You know, just in terms of what we're speaking about here, this is about advocacy. It's about champions, right? I mean, to get our word out, to get people to understand what this is really all about. Liron talked about votes, but we also work towards making sure that leaders in our community are also our biggest advocates as well, and that they can become our champions. I just wanted to mention a very interesting program that Federation has helped to sponsor in the past. It's been done a few times already, and that is where, and it's done in conjunction with Change. That's over at Brookdale. I think, is everybody familiar with the Change Center? So in any case, it's a very interesting program, and that is where I believe it's about 30 police officers are brought to Washington, to the Holocaust Museum, and they are there for a couple of days. And it's a very intensive program. They're taken through the museum, and there's a lot of education. And it's been very interesting because I've actually spoken with some of these officers when they returned, and they have said it was a life changer for them. They learned what they did not know before. And I think that really says quite a bit. So if we could reach out, develop these relationships, and kind of teach the teachers or the influencers or the people in our community what they didn't learn, whether it be in school or in their family or in their community, that's going to be really pretty vital. That I think is going to be what we need to do. And there are many ways to do it. Dan was talking about interfaith groups. We've done that, and we continue to do that, but we need to do much more as well. And I think people tend to forget that we as a Jewish population are not very far removed from being refugees ourselves. I mean, how many parents, grandparents came here, went to Israel, and other places, for those very same reasons. So we have alliances we could be building, and that's what we are doing. And that's what I think we should be continuing to do. And there's so many ways we could do it. And that's why it's great to hear everybody's ideas on different ways that we could get out there and develop relations, whether it be through meetings or what have you, different forums, perhaps with teachers in the community or others. So I think it's a great dialogue to have.
Excellent point.
Yeah, thank you.
Phil, I'll get to you next. Ilana.
It's very surprising to find out that many people, especially people that I know, are not aware of the problem of anti-Semitism in their communities or around the world or in Israel. And I'm thinking now, sitting here and hearing what people are saying, how can we give more information or involve people in that matter? Because people are so busy in everyday happenings, especially the viruses and work issues, family issues. For some reason, I invited 2 of my best friends to come tonight, and I don't see them here, which is disappointing about the lack of being aware of this matter. So I heard Amy saying by groups, like invite people by groups like teachers, lawyers, doctors, maybe this direction, and create representatives from each group to meet again together. Something like this.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Not just because you're my mom, but it's a great idea. And some of what we've been doing is that, but not necessarily in those groups, but that's a good way to keep developing the community briefings that I've been doing and that others from the Federation have been doing. So I wrote it down, and I think it's one of the great ways we can develop these community briefings. So thank you, Ima. Phil, I saw your hand was up.
Thanks. I just wanted to share an activity that the 45 Reform congregations in New Jersey get together as part of a Religious Action Center New Jersey chapter, part of the URJ. And so we have from month to month advocacy, mostly legislative advocacy issues. And the thing is, it has us crossing paths with a lot of other communities, including the Black community. And there's something. This goes all the way back to Jews being on as part of the marches with Martin Luther King. When you're with people advocating for their causes, you make friends. And a lot of the issues that the Black community is really concerned about, environmental justice, socioeconomic issues, fairer policing, they're things that they're political a little bit, but we can really get behind, some of their concerns. And that may be a way to build alliances. It's already working, for the Reform congregations. Same day, we're working on same-day voter registration, rights for formerly incarcerated people, for housing and voting, a bunch of different issues like that are almost apolitical for Jews.
Phil, don't want to put you on the spot, but that's a great idea. Could you help us make those connections and maybe
Okay, so the organization is the Reform Action Center of New Jersey chapter. Sarah Blaine, we just actually in the last year hired a full-time coordinator, facilitator. She's a lawyer. She's really good, and I can forward her email.
Thank you. That would be excellent. I think I saw Dale turn his camera on, but I don't know. I don't want to put you on the spot, Dale. Or, there you are. Yes. Wait, you're on mute, sir. Dale, you're on mute. Thank
Of
you.
course. Yeah, I don't mind being on the spot. It's easier when I'm on mute because then I can't say something stupid. So I have two comments. One, generally in terms of getting involved with the Black community. I think it's a phenomenal idea because they have a lot of surging interest in, on the street action and political action and so on, which I think would be beneficial for us to tap into. I think the most powerful thing we can say to the Black community is, there's a stereotype of Jews being prominent and important and powerful. And, our position could be, we would like to utilize our white privilege to help the community because that's the right thing to do. So I think I would agree with what was said and would love to contribute to that. On a personal issue in our local active adult community, we recently had a very interesting event where one of our members decided that the Christmas decorations in the clubhouse were not Christian enough, and this individual decided to add a creche nativity scene, which was not sanctioned by the committee or the board and was forced to remove it. But in the meantime, this person created.
Put it back today.
They did? Oh boy. This person created a whole tumult because of the claim that this was removed in an anti-Christian way. But the consequence was that there were anti-Semitic comments going around about how the Jews are in control of everything and they would not allow the Christmas scene to be put into the clubhouse. But having said that, the whole issue of the Christmas display aside, the interesting thing to me and the concern is that there is an undercurrent of anti-Semitism, which is now being tapped into, starting with one person and moving forward. And this is an issue that affects us because we live in a community that's very small and we have multiple friends who are mixed marriages. We have friends who are, highly devout Catholics, and we have friends who are Italian and friends who are, members of the community that we're friendly with of all walks of life. And this undercurrent is something which is a very big concern to us. Not sure how to react to it.
So I would love to talk with you further about this. And I don't know if you want to share it here or not, but do you mind telling me which community, or would you prefer to do that offline?
Yeah, we can do that offline.
Okay. I will reach out to you. Because I had someone reach out to me with something very similar, also an adult community, which I can talk to you offline. And I'm wondering if it's the same community, but
it's possible.
But I will talk to you about that. This is a perfect time for me to tell you also, if we have a reporting system in place, by the way, we have a full-time security director or director of security initiatives who is here for not only that, but for those types of situations where you can file a report with us and we can, based on the report, follow up with the necessary authority, the proper authorities, or take certain actions that are in line with whatever happened. So I'm happy. I will provide that information, in an email after this meeting as well. But you should all know that we have a system in place for that. Are there any other? I would love to hear other ideas. I know we're already past the time, but I'm happy to stay. I would love to hear more ideas. Maybe we've talked a lot about interfaith, bridge building. How about other priorities or other concerns that you might have? Yeah, Henry, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dan. To just a quick aside to Dale's concerns. I grew up in Tennessee in the 50s and 60s, and every day in the second grade, I sang, "Yes, Jesus loves me," because we had a very fundamentalist teacher, and I didn't know the difference. Okay, you want me to sing the song? I'll sing it. One of the things that I'm concerned about is the lack of awareness. We talked about this a little bit before briefly. The lack of awareness about the Holocaust. Let's talk about bringing our educators in and so on and so forth. But I read a survey not too long ago with about a third of Americans under the age of 25 or 30 or whatever it was have never heard of the Holocaust. And this is a group that gets much of its information through social media, through the very avenues that provide so much of the anti-Semitic information and material being circulated in our society today. So I would like to broach the idea of, how do we go about addressing this particular issue? How do we target this younger, millennials or Generation X, Y, or Z, or whatever they're called these days, and helping them get a better understanding of the stuff they're reading about online is not necessarily true and is actually harmful to them and to our democracy.
So what I can tell you is that you've touched on one of the most difficult tasks that all Jewish organizations are dealing with at the moment. Is social media and how to deal with what's going on social media. That's one. And two, how to get to the younger generation and the younger millennials and even much younger than that as well. So I don't have an answer for you here or a solution, but regarding social media, I can give you some insight also into our part in a national push against Facebook. There was, I think it was ADL and JFNA, Jewish Federations of North America, together were engaging, Facebook and members of Congress to try and get, I forget what it's called, Section 230, or I forget what it's called. It's the law that's in place right now that basically gives social media companies. It releases them of liability of whatever it is.
Right, it's Section 230, yeah.
Okay, oh, I remember, that's great. It's very difficult. We were able to get, or at least to get, Facebook to theoretically deal with the Holocaust denial and take it down and a lot of the extremism. But from what I'm hearing from my contacts in the national organizations is that it's not happening. They said they were doing it, they will do it, but it's really not happening. So yeah, I mean, this is something that is on the top of all of the Jewish organizations list, and ours too. To do our local part when it comes to advocating, talking with our members of Congress. But Henry, unfortunately, I don't have like a solution here for that, or a straight answer, because it's really an uphill battle that we're all dealing with. Judy, I saw your hand up. Yeah, but Henry, I don't know if you wanted to finalize.
I understand what you're saying. I think we're dealing with a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
Alan, I saw your comment. I'm going to get to you right after Judy.
I have quite a few things I'd like to say, but to address the last comment, I volunteered through JFS for a Holocaust survivor who's, I'll get choked up, she just passed away. But she was 90 years old and she would go to high schools, and most notably the North Brunswick High School, and she would address 300 people. And they were students of every color. And they were so moved by her that they would come up afterwards. I used to bring her with a bottle of Purell because I was so worried that she was embracing that all of them. They would come up to her afterwards. It was so moving. And I spoke to the teacher who initiated it to see whether we could continue the program now that Frida's gone. And she said, yes, she is continuing it. And that she constantly has feedback from all the years that Frida was doing that, how people come back and say what a difference it made to her life, to their lives, and how they looked at Jews and their suffering. And they never saw Jews as minorities. They saw them more as oppressors, as go-getters, as people that they couldn't relate to, and now they could. And Frida left me with a lot of material. I don't know if other schools in the area would want to have programs like that. Perhaps they already do have programs like that, but that is available. One of my big concerns is our image, because I think if we could relate to other groups and underscore elimination of hate, maybe we could find a common denominator in that way. And I don't know if you've reached out to the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is a marvelous, marvelous organization because it addresses hate from every aspect. And that could be an organization, an umbrella organization that has worked with local Black groups, Jewish groups of, every minority that needs some help. And it's a marvelous organization. And just another quick thing, to me, our image is so important. And I think that a great deal of the anti-Semitism is linked with Judaism and Zionism and the Palestinian question. And that's a huge topic. But I don't think that the Israeli agencies, I don't think we as community members do enough to promote everything that has been done for the Palestinians, to promote a better image of how Israel takes care of the Arabs within her borders. It's a huge enterprise, a huge topic, not for this moment, but that's maybe another avenue to explore down the road.
Absolutely. I'd like to get to Alan and then David.
Hi, first
Thank
of
you,
all,
Judy.
my apologies for not having the camera on, but I cannot get it to work. So it's not that I'm shy. So let me tell you something that happened several years ago. We had a group of Jewish organizations, maybe 10, 12 different organizations come to our congregation at B'nai Tikva. And so I went around because I didn't know very many of them and I wanted to learn more. So I talked to one organization that brought teenagers to Israel. And I was curious. I said, well, do you take them to meet Palestinians as well? And they said, we used to, but we don't anymore. Or they come back being pro-Palestinian. And that, it should bother everybody here. It bothered me. And I think part of the reason that this conversion happens is because we are inside our own bubble when we talk about Israel and Palestine. We do not do it in a rigorous fashion. We do not look at ourselves objectively. We say, oh, well, Jews were here 2,000 years ago. And then they go and they hear, we were here 40 years ago, and now we're not. They're talking to people whose parents were moved out of their land. We don't have a rigorous discussion about this, and they are essentially defenseless to any argument they hear. And I think we really need to do a lot better job at teaching our children, our young men and women, to understand this so that when they go to college, they're not rolled over.
Mm-hmm. You mean to take them out of the quote unquote bubble?
Yes, and to really have a vigorous discussion about it instead of what essentially is propaganda. Not for nothing, but if Cameron's going to call the New York Times anti-Semitic every time Meg Greenberg writes an article about Israel, you're not having a real discussion anymore.
Yeah, if I could just, this is something that's been on my mind for a while now too. How do you walk that line between objectively between believing objectively that we are the good guys, quote unquote, but also we've made a lot of mistakes sometimes too. And I think there's a challenge here, because you got to remember who it is that you're generally who's your competitor for the public mind. The anti-Israel groups, they have no self-awareness whatsoever. Sorry. I thought
Good.
someone was trying to get my attention. They don't have any self-awareness whatsoever. You know, all they will talk about is all the quote unquote terrible things that Israel does, never acknowledging the terrible things that Hamas or the Palestinian Authority does, often to their own people, right? So it's a little bit problematic to try to impress upon especially younger people that they should be proud to be Jewish and proud to be, you know, pro-Israel or whatever, but also kind of being a little wishy-washy. Having said that, I understand it. I understand what you're saying, and I find myself cringing very often by at things that people on quote unquote my side are saying, almost as often as what I hear from others. But I'm not sure that we have a great. I'm not sure that anyone has truly cracked that nut yet, which is why I think that it's going to take some difficult discussions internally before we really get too deep externally. And I think Dale, is your hand up because you wanted to say something?
I also just Dale, if you can be brief, that would be awesome, because David Nussbaum has been waiting patiently, and I want to get to him. So I appreciate it.
My only comment is that, you know, there are multiple Jewish lobby and Israel lobby organizations in DC. There's one called J Street, which is much more liberal and prepared to criticize the government of Israel while maintaining very forcefully the right of the Jewish state to exist. And I think it's not terribly difficult to maintain a position of criticizing the government and still supporting with enthusiasm the right of the state to exist.
Thank you. David, thank you for waiting patiently. Wait, you have to unmute yourself first. Thank you. There you go.
Hello, everybody. It seems to me that we're very focused on strategies, and we're not so focused on goals and objectives and what our priorities are. What are we trying to accomplish? We're probably not going to dominate social media through a comprehensive campaign that has local and national implications. But there are lots of Jewish agencies that are doing a lot of that now. ADL, committee, Congress, J Street, everybody's out there working social media. The real question, I guess, is does this community relations committee or council have a set of goals and objectives of what they're trying to accomplish? In which sectors are they trying to accomplish them? And I guess then it would make sense to deal with the strategy of how do you accomplish them? But we seem to be talking about style and strategy and not so much about what our goals and objectives are.
So I can answer that very quickly. The answer is yes, and every year we reassess. So this year's goals were threefold or 3 points. It was to establish a network of allies. It was to ensure that issues important to the Jewish community remained a priority for lawmakers. And through all of that, we were hoping to also strengthen the future of Jewish Federation through the work of the JCRs. Did we accomplish all of that? To a degree, you know, COVID got in the way of some of that. Other issues got in the way. But we do actually receive priorities from Jewish Federations of North America each year. And we look at that and study that and see if it applies, you know, locally. And we pick and choose from this long list of priorities and determine what we can accomplish here. So the answer is yes. And also, you know, we adapt and switch in, you know, accordingly. Again, COVID makes things very difficult. For example, establishing a network of allies, you know, there's only so much you can do through Zoom. And then we had, you know, people didn't want to meet, people didn't, I think you know what I'm saying. So yeah, it's not like we're trying to tackle Facebook, you know, but these issues do come up, and we do our part. We do our part here locally. But David, you and I had met privately, and so I'm happy to share with you these goals, and we can look at them together and share with other members of the committee. So I think I know where you're going with this because of our previous conversation, and I'm really happy to involve you in that. Joel, I think you wanted to add to that. Yeah.
David, I give you a slightly different, where you disappeared on me. Oh, there you are. Okay, I look left instead of right. I give you a slightly different answer than Dan. I think the answer is 50-50. Underneath the burden of COVID, we had to be in certain kinds reactive instead of strategically planning the goals out. Dan correctly puts what the goals are, or some of the goals for the coming year, to which he and I will have a discussion about adding educational components to it. This is the year, though, that we will be putting the plans together to achieve those goals and prioritizing the goals now that we have a working committee. Okay, the committee's been, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, it's been only about a year and a half at most, even when you condense the time for COVID. So now that we better understand some of our capabilities, you are exactly correct. And we've started out to put the flesh to the skeleton that already has been put into place. Okay, but you are correct. There's one piece, though, that I'm afraid you opened Pandora's box on. If any number of you who are sitting around this meeting tonight don't also raise your hand and say, we'd like to do something, and there's just so many places where something can be done, starting right out with the planning, the prioritizing, the setting of work plans, etc., then nothing will really be accomplished and we'll just be spinning our wheels. We need you. You know, when I say we, those people who are on the committee, I think I'll take the chance of speaking for them and saying, we collectively want to reach out to each of you, take you by the hand, have you join us, have you participate, have you be a vocal force, tap into your brains. The only person I'm not going to allow is Henry, because he didn't bring me up a bottle of Tennessee Jack Daniels.
Thanks, Joel.
But you're probably a Tennessee Vol fan too, and I grew up in Nashville, but I'm a big Vandy guy.
I got a barrel of Jack Daniels single barrel, so we can share it anytime. But
so I just want to, Joel, can I just cut you off real quick?
Yeah, go. I'm done.
People are dropping off, and I just want to say I can officially end the meeting here. I'm happy to stay on, but I do want to say that our next session is January 19th. It will be with a representative from Jewish Federations of New Jersey, which is our state entity. And his name is Josh Cohen, and he will be talking about advocacy methods and how they are different for each type of issue. What I can see from this group is that you're all dedicated and interested and you care. And that's all, for me, that was a win for tonight because that's what I wanted to see. And I would really hope to see you all back here next month. But I think I also would really love to have you stay in contact with me in between. You know, let's meet. If you're willing to meet in person, I'm there. Just let me know. I will come to you. If you want to meet on Zoom, that works for me as well. Let's not wait till next month to continue this dialogue. And I just want to thank you all for being here. And like I said, I'm happy to stay on with anybody who wants to keep talking. But thank you very much. I want to be mindful of your time. So thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Dan.
everyone.
Thanks.
my last
Sorry, Joel.
comment.
Yeah.
What? I was just going to say, for those of you here and those of you who left, a happy, a healthy, prosperous new year. And let's hope we find some peace next year as well.
Oh, I'm into that.
Thank you
so much, Dan. Really appreciate it. Joel, appreciate your comments. Thank you. And Laron as well. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. And if you know of anybody else who would like to join us, please let us know.